What's up, everyone? Coach Paul here, and I'm going to break down the traditional barbell deadlift. It gets hammered and kind of overused a little bit of times, and so I'm going to talk about how you can make sure to know that you're applying it correctly, common mistakes that I see with it. Check out some of the other videos, the kettlebell deadlift, trap bar deadlift. Those might be variations that are a little bit better for you, but if you do find that the barbell is either all that you have or something that does work for your ability level, then I think this video is going to be really helpful in breaking down some of the cues that I use myself, cues that I use with my clients, and just to make sure that you're in a really good, strong position so that you can do this for a really long time. So first thing I always start with is going to be the breath and making sure that we create a really good container for the rib cage to be in line with the pelvis. So much of the population, the mistakes you see in the gym is flared rib cage and that lower back extension. And so people get really tight in the low back. People get a lot of jamming, a lot of issues with the joints, the disc and everything, and that's just going to come from a habitual pattern of being here, right? We sit all day at our desk, so we're just here, typing on our desk, ton of tension here, loss of stability and strength here. So first thing you want to do is make sure that you got a really good breathing thing, really good breathing pattern. And so what I like to do is put the hands around the lowest ribs and just get that exhale. That exhale pulls the ribs down. You almost want to think about abs being on the front so that the rib cage is now in line with the pelvis. You can go from here, now we're in line. Another way to think about this is just reaching, whether it's towards the floor or long. All right, so now we have this container. I like to also think of it as a Pepsi can, right? It's a big soda can, big strong rectangle that we want that's gonna move. Now, as we approach the bar, a couple things we wanna make sure we do here. We wanna make sure that we have a good base. So if I'm gonna be super athletic and jump, right? That's the place I'm gonna want my feet in. If we get out here, we're getting into some sort of sumo variations. If we get a little bit more narrow, that's typically gonna be something that you wanna stick away from. I like to, for most people, generally be in a good athletic stance. And then we're gonna wanna pull that bar towards the shins. So we're gonna walk that bar and shins right up to it. This floor is uneven, so we're gonna get it to play by pulling it towards us. Cool, so we're in this position. Now when I get into a deadlift, I wanna make sure I got my knees under my hips, hips under my shoulders. So shoulders on top of hips, hips on top of knees. So I'm gonna pull this bar in. Now I'm in this position. Shins are gonna be relatively vertical. They might come forward slightly. The more you get them vertical, the higher those hips are gonna come, the more stretch you're gonna feel here, and this might be an issue where you've got a little bit of mobility. So find something right in here that feels good, and then a good way to know that you're in a good position is that you can see letters. So I don't have letters on my chest, but if I got letters that are showing up towards the coach or towards the wall, I wanna make sure that I'm showing those. So if you get here, this is gonna be really Romanian deadlifted. We don't want that. If you get here and too much extension, right, we don't want that. We want something right in between. So right here. Next, once we get into that position, we got a really good torso, we got a really good breath. Pull this in line with our shins. Feet are hip width apart. I like to have the arms right outside the shins and the knees so I can kind of push those knees out into the forearms. What that's going to do is that's going to help create more tension in the hamstrings and in the glutes, because that's where we're going to want to drive tension as we go into the lift. So now you're coming in here. I'll rotate a little bit so you can see my chest. Got those shins rotated in, driving in. Now, second thing I want to do with the hands, or with the forearms, is I want to kind of break this in half. I want to create some sort of tension. I want to pull the slack out of the bar. So listen to that click. That click's how I know, all right, I've got my lats engaged. I've got the shoulders pulled down. And what I don't want to do in this position is I don't want to jerk and pull it and create a ton of torque in the shoulder. I also don't want to come into this with flexed elbows like this. All right, so we're coming up. And keep in mind, all these cues might fix just the one problem that you have. So don't get too wrapped up in the cues. Be looking for one thing that might put everything and click it all together. These are all just a number of cues, number of issues that you're gonna run into as you go to different parts of the setup of the execution. So now we've got everything here. Pulling it in, knees driving out, pulling those shoulders down and away, hips, shoulders, knees all in the right spot. Now from here, we wanna drive into the floor. So take that slack out, drive into the floor. Shins are gonna travel, or bar's gonna travel all the way up the shins, get real tall. Then you're gonna come back down, and that's one. Big thing again with that breath right before that lift. I like to make sure that the rib cage is in line with the pelvis with breath. But then I also like to create a secondary layer of tension. So I get here, maybe fill up through the nose, a little exhale pre-lift, then you're coming up, creating that tension all throughout this region of the core so that this isn't doing all the work. If this can stay strong and active, this is going to be able, still going to be working it, but it's not going to be the dominant lift or the dominant muscle doing the lift. Last thing I'll say is, as people get to the top, see this ton, they get up tall, hip thrust all the way through it. That's not doing anything for your glutes. It's just putting your low back in a really tough position. Again, causing a ton of tension in the low back muscles. Really problematic for the lumbar spine and the regions that cause a lot of problems for a lot of people. So just as a recap, you're going to make sure rib cage pulls down, shins vertical, send the hips back like you're closing a car door. Now from here, I'm going to pull the bar into my shins, find a position that allows you to find some tension. Then from here, make sure you got your chest and the numbers showing. Then you're going to take that slack out. One last breath. Coming up and coming back down. One last thing, I know I said one last thing, I got one more. Some people can't lift off the floor, right? They just don't have the mobility. The limbs are too long. You see that a lot with people with long femurs. So one thing you can do is you can take plates and you can help elevate that deadlift for you. So you elevate it here, and you'll notice how much more accessible this is to me in this position when I go up to it. Now this bar is not rolling, which is great. Hold into that camera a little bit better. So now we're here. You can see I now brought the floor much closer to me so that when I go to pull off, I no longer have to maybe put myself in a rounded position to be able to get to it. Allows me to sit into it a little bit more. Knees under hips, hips under shoulders. Coming up and coming back down. Again, big thing is going to be making sure that that breast type rib cage is pulled down over the pelvis. Give your low back a chance to work. Let me know if you have any questions. Drop them in the comments or reach out to me. More than happy to talk through this and break down any other issues that you might be working through.